Welcome to Better Teaching, Only Stuff That Works, a podcast for teachers, instructional coaches, administrators, and anyone else who supports teachers in the classroom. This show is a proud member of the BE Podcast Network, shows that help you go beyond education. Find all our shows at bepodcastnetwork.com. I am Gene Tavernetti, the host for this podcast, and my goal for this episode, like all episodes, is that you laugh at least once and that you leave with an actionable idea for better teaching. A quick reminder, no cliches, no buzzwords, only stuff that works. It is my honor and privilege to have as my guest today, Patrice Bain. Patrice is a K-12 and university educator and speaker. She is the co-author of the U.S. Department of Education's guide, Organizing Instruction and Study to Improve Student Learning, and is also the co-author of one of her most well-known books, and the books that I see most often on principals and teachers' bookshelves, and that is Powerful Teaching, Unleash the Science of Learning. She is also the author of A Parent's Guide to Powerful Teaching and her latest book, Powerful Classrooms, Evidence-Informed Strategies and Resources. Patrice was an Illinois Teacher of the Year finalist, Fulbright Scholar in Europe, featured in international podcasts, webinars, presentations, and popular press, including Nova and Scientific American. Bain has contributed to the United Nations UNESCO International Science and Evidence-Based Education Assessments, outlining the vision for world education by 2030. It is my extreme pleasure to have Patrice as my guest. Good morning, Patrice. It's so wonderful to have you on the show. I'm honored to have you on the show, and so welcome.
Hello, Jean. It is wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Well, I appreciate you hanging in with me because we had originally scheduled to do this in August when I got COVID. And so you're gracious enough to reschedule. So I really appreciate that. But so in the introduction, we talked about, you've got 3 books out, and the first one that you really became well known for was the one that you co-authored, and that was Powerful Teaching, Unleashing the Science of Learning. And that was about the researchers actually being in your classrooms. And I heard you tell an interesting story just recently about you going to your principal and getting permission to allow researchers in your classroom. And he had a provision for you. There was something that you had to agree to. What was it? I thought it was a very interesting story.
Well, this was actually my superintendent.
Oh, okay.
The very first question that he asked me was, why do you want to do this? And my answer was so simple. It was, I really want to know how my students learn. Easy, but not quite. And then he said, I will give you one stipulation. We can do this, but the research has to go along with your teaching. Your teaching does not go along with the research. And that was something that it made such a big difference because too often, so much research is done at universities with college students in laboratories. And then other research is often done by pulling kids out of a classroom and having them read a passage and answer some questions or something like that. But this was truly done within my classroom using my teaching. And that was pretty rare. It's still pretty rare. But that's what we really want to know, isn't it? How do kids really learn in an authentic classroom?
Exactly. And I think that leads me to my next question. And, you are well known, for retrieval practice, promoting retrieval practice in the science of learning movement. I don't know how else to describe it other than a movement. People are very almost evangelical about, because we know this works. And so we want to talk about it. So if I was to be in your classroom, or anybody were to be in your classroom and observed you, did not know anything about retrieval practice, did not know anything about the science of learning, would they still be able to say, wow, Patrice was a good teacher? Look at what the kids can do. Is what I'm trying to ask is, do you have to know research? Do we have to present the research and sell the research to teachers to look at effective teaching? Or is it something that's evident?
Boy, that is a really good question. To me, one of the most important things to know is the why. Why are these strategies effective? What purpose do these strategies have? So if they were observing me, I hope they would have seen a class with a lot of being interactive with each other, with me, a lot of retrieval. But what I would most want teachers to know is the reason why I was doing these things. I think that's really important to know the why.
Okay. And they would see that it's evident. And the reason that I ask the question is anytime there is, over the past 30 years when I've been involved in education, there's always something that says, oh, this is new, this is new. But when you really get to see it, it doesn't look that much different. It includes the why, which you just described, so that you can be consistent and intentional with what it is that you're doing. Um, so
Yes, yes. So it's like, okay, how many teachers, probably everyone, will review before an exam, right? However, being able to just incorporate retrieval and metacognition, allowing strategies or using strategies that allow the students to be able to determine what they know versus what they don't know. It's like it's something that teachers do, but maybe not taking it to that next step, which is evidence-based, how to go from review to retrieving. Or another thing, some really good teachers are going to see, read my book or attend a presentation and say, well, I do that. I do that. And chances are, yes, you do. But again, here's the reason why it works. And even though you do it, here's a way to be more intentional and more purposeful. If you space, retrieve the day after you learn something, and again 3 days later, and then a week later, you know, simple things like that are research based that really help those good teachers who are intuitive really make it stick.
and I think you said something, you didn't just say it. I have heard you say it. And that is that a lot of this is meta. It's we want to teach the kids how to learn so that they become more effective learners, self-learners themselves, because they also know that. How did you do that? How did you teach the students this about retrieval practice and those sorts of things, how to become a better student, how to study better?
Well, it all started with the research in my classroom. So I knew about the research and I could create strategies based on that research. But I saw such a big difference, especially with my struggling students, that where they had previously internalized failure, perhaps studying and not doing well, and seeing them turn around, it made me think that learning is like this really big party. And the struggling students never receive the invitation, right? And as teachers, we need to get everybody coming to this wonderful learning party. And the way I would do it every year on the first day, I would always say, I'm your teacher and I'm going to teach you how to learn. To me, that was even more important than the curriculum, because if I taught them how to learn, my curriculum would stick. And so I would start, and I am talking right now, working with sixth graders in world history. So it was the first time that this appeared in the curriculum in our district. And so on the first day, I would ask a question: how many of you have studied for a test and didn't do well? And, 95%, if not more, hands go up. And I would just explain there's a reason why. And it's because the way you studied, we can improve on that. I can teach you why that happens. And then I would start where the students absolutely could not fail. I knew I wanted retrieval, a very important part of my class. I know I wanted turn and talks. I know I wanted whiteboards. And so, when we first start the beginning of the school year, putting together these procedures, well, I would start on day one with whiteboards and put out their questions that no where no one would fail, such as, what's the latest you slept over the summer? Okay, they would write it down, share with a partner, do a big think, pair, share. And I would do things like, what is your worst school lunch to you? And they would answer that. And so what happens is you get the students involved in thinking and writing and talking to a partner and sharing in a class. So I would do that well before I ever got into curriculum. So students were very familiar. I taught them retrieval. I taught them spacing, that we're going to go over this again tomorrow. A week later, I would say, remember a week ago, we discussed, well, we're retrieving again. This is spacing. So I would teach my students all along exactly what these power tools were, why they were effective. And students started to see that they work. And that, of course, then got the students even more invested in learning how to learn.
You have presented all over the world on this content about retrieval practice and what you just described. And you've also worked at open conferences, and conferences, usually people are there because they're buying what you're selling. They're already excited about seeing Patrice, and now they get to see her in person. But you've also worked at a lot of schools. And how is there any difference in the reception from teachers, at schools when you talk about this content? Is there any pushback, I guess is what my question is.
I try to, when I'm working with schools, I really try to get everyone involved and to model, to practice what I preach and model, so teachers can see that, oh, I can do that. Because we all know teachers are so overworked and with totally overcrowded plates. And if I'm working with a school, one of the first things they might think would be, oh, here's one more thing. And I think because I was in the classroom for well over 25 years, I know what it was like to sit through professional development where it did not help my teaching. It did not do anything to help my students. And I often called it the fad of the semester club because, here was the newest, shiniest object that we had to incorporate. And so because I have that background, I really take that to heart when I'm talking to teachers. I want to maximize the use of their time and to show them that it can be done. And I show them the evidence and the whys.
And what you talk about with the retrieval practice, it reminds me very much of other things that I have learned that off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but this is one of those things, retrieval practice and how to study. It's one of those things I wish that I had known, you know,
Yeah.
and I think that's one of the reasons that I think it is powerful too, because not only is it something that an adult wishes they had known and they wish that it had been done this way, but it's also evidence-based because there are so many things that as adults we will go to a PDE or we will go to a conference and we'll hear this idea. and we'll think, oh, that's wonderful. But we don't realize we're hearing it as adult experts versus what it's like not to know this. Where this is, I want to say non-offensive, and I think especially the way that you just presented that, how you work with teachers, is that you may not have known this, but this is life-changing stuff, and it's not that difficult.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the things, that it's very clear that you are a big advocate of is using evidence-based practices.
Mhm.
And, you talked about your 25 years in the classroom, and I know we hear a lot of things about evidence-based now, but it seems to me that in all the years that I was involved in PD and there was something new, it was also evidence-based. Well, that's what they would say. This is research based, this is the research base. And so now I think, when someone like you who is really talking about evidence, that sometimes there may be pushback. It's like the boy who cried wolf. You know, why is your evidence different? And what does a teacher need to know to be able to sift through, what really is evidence-based versus maybe a publisher coming in and saying, no, this is based on research. How do you address that with teachers? Or does it even come up?
Well, first of all, a quick little story. I once met with an assistant principal in my building who actually told me, oh, whenever you say something, just say it's research based and people will buy it. And I was like, what? What? So I think something so important because you'll see that it based in research. It's a very simple question for a teacher to ask, on what research is this based? You know, to whoever is presenting or a book that's written, on what research is it based? And there is a wonderful book out called The Goldilocks Map by Andrew Watson that is so on target with this very question because number one, teachers are often not familiar with how to read the research, or the research is in these super lengthy journals trying to and we don't have time to read that. So Andrew in his book The Goldilocks Map takes us to show us, you know, this is a quick way, he gives us sites like Google Scholar, just take a look here, shows us how to take a look at a research paper and get the gist. And if you have spent 2 or 3 minutes and it doesn't apply, let it go. So there are ways to help teachers try to understand in quick ways because we don't have a lot of time, but never be afraid to ask on what evidence is this based.
Very good. I'm going to put Andrew's book in the notes of this because it is critical. And going back to something else that you said earlier about who was the population? There are so many, I'll read an abstract about something and it's graduate students in medical school. Well, for crying
Mhm.
out loud, how does that going to pertain to my low SES, high EL learner population? So
Exactly.
yeah, and I think that's critical. So thank you for that. One of the things that is you talked about the fad of the month,
Mhm.
like let's break it down even to bi-monthly fads. And that is all the proliferation of educational platforms in the techno world. What do you think of those? Do you have any advice for teachers, or what do you think about those types of platforms will promote, retrieval practice?
Yeah, it's like you could spend a year trying to dive through everything that's available, right? And to me, that is really overwhelming. How do I do it? I look to people I trust, number one, and get recommendations from them. But also just take a look. If it says, get retrieval practice using this or that, well, try it. Give yourself 2 minutes on it. Are you retrieving? Is it actually working? Is it actually based on research? So I think number one, go to a trusted source. And number two, try it out yourself and see, this fit what I need it to do in my classroom? And I think using those two things can help weed through the multitude of platforms that are available.
Well, and I'm going to go back to a previous answer that you gave when you said the first thing you do is you have the kids use whiteboards. And
Mhm.
there are so many. I remember doing a training once and I passed out whiteboards because I'm like you, I want to model what we're saying. And somebody picked up the whiteboard and in a snarky voice said, "Oh, a low-tech tablet." And thinking, there are so many times when the tool is the whiteboard. I mean, how you can't do it so much. You can do it so much more quickly. You can, you don't have to worry, is the internet down? And so I'm not saying I'm not a Luddite, but there are times when it just gets in the way. It just, again, it's that fad, that neomania, what's new this week. One thing I think you don't fit into this category anymore, Patrice, but you may have fit into this category in the past. I meet a lot of teachers at conferences who they're speaking at conferences all over the country. And I ask them, so, how about in your district? Do you ever do work in your district? And many times they'll say, they don't even know what I do. The people in their district never ask them, to present. And did that happen to you, that you were out, presenting this information to the world and yet you weren't known in your district? Or did you have a different experience?
It depends on the time frame. No, it didn't, and yes, it did. So was so fortunate to work under a principal for 20 years, the same principal who was just amazing, who supported Dr. Roger Chamberlain, who supported his teachers, who whenever I would go to him with one of my harebrained ideas, he would say, "Let's make it happen. How can we make this
Yeah.
happen?" And I had a wonderful superintendent, Mr. Jack Turner. And so, yes, I was able to share a lot of information. But as they retired and new administrators came on board, they had their own agendas, I guess you could say. And having a teacher who speaks all over didn't really necessarily go with the agenda that they wanted to have. So yes, there was times that yes, I was able to share and people knew what I was doing, and other times no. So it really depended a lot on the administration.
Okay, because I think it's such a shame that we don't look inward because there's so much talent. I've never been to a school that didn't have talented teachers. Some of them
Totally
were very
agree.
new, some of them were very experienced. But what would we do? Oh, we've got to go get the expert, and the old cliche about the expert's 50 miles from home, or it's the county office, or it's, and it's just too bad because I think that the teachers that I've talked to want to share. They want to help. They want to mentor. They want to help their colleagues, but they're just not asked.
Right. And I really think that in many places this is changing as a result of districts really bringing in or elevating teachers into becoming instructional coaches. And I think, you know, in the past, it seemed you were a teacher or you were an administrator. And when you taught to a certain, if you wanted to advance, the only way you could advance was to leave the classroom and become an administrator. But now there's these wonderful opportunities in many districts to have instructional coaches where the coaches can really help elevate the teachers and promote more of teacher leadership within the district. And I think that is something that really needs to be cultivated because that's really a way to help. It just helps the whole district, you know, it can bring folks together, it can elevate voices. And I think that's something that in the past was really missing, but I see more opportunities for that now.
Yeah, here, I absolutely agree. And I think, you didn't do it as a district or site administrator, but I think that's one of the things that you did in your latest book is taking, what teachers were doing and allowing them to be part of the story in your book, which again elevates them. Now, what happens in their district, I don't know. Could you talk a little bit about your newest book, Powerful Classrooms, and how those stories were gathered and told?
Well, it all started because in some parts of my life, I'm very organized, and in some parts, I am totally not. And one way I was not was that I would frequently get tagged on social media, using this strategy of mine or that strategy of mine, or, whatever. And it's like, oh, that looks good. I'll bookmark it. Oh, that looks good. I'll download it. And set one day, once again, somebody tagged me and I realized, boy, where's everything that I've been saving for years? And I couldn't find them. And I thought, I need to just stop what I'm doing and put everything together. And so that's what prompted this. And as I did that, I had this idea of like, well, if I like everything in one place, maybe others would too. And so that got me started. And then I realized, I worked with teachers all over the world and they're, whether it's Kazakhstan or Poland or Colorado, people are using many of my strategies. Why not illustrate and amplify the voices of people who are using the science of learning in their classrooms? And so I thought, oh, that would be good in a book. And then the last part was I was thinking one day about, oh, my edu heroes, these people that I just hold on such a high level because they've made such a difference to me. Dan Willingham and Barbara Oakley and just all these wonderful people. And I had an idea, and it was who influences them? And so I came up with three questions. One, of your own work, what are you most proud of or would like to share? What work of someone else's would you recommend? And who influences you? And I got, I don't know, I think over 40 people from all over the world who have highly influenced me, who are well known, and they answered those questions. And so it just all came together into this book. But actually, and it even starts with the research in my classroom the first classroom in the United States where cognitive scientists studied how kids learn in a classroom, not a pullout or not, in a laboratory, but actually teaching with fire drills and, everything. And so in powerful teaching, I allude to it a little bit, and it's research in my classroom and research in Pooja's classroom and other studies. But I wanted a place where I could really talk about what the research was like in my classroom using my voice and my interpretation. And so between the research and the strategies and the instructional leaders and teachers and influencers, it just all came together. And Wiley, who published Powerful Teaching, said this would be a great companion book to Powerful Teaching, and boom. And so I'm really proud of this book because I think this is kind of my thank you, my gift, that it will really help teachers incorporate the science of learning into their classrooms. It's just filled with strategies and resources.
And not to put you on the spot, but I think you might remember this. You in the session where I was able to hear you talk about this a little bit, you mentioned the number of strategies in your book, and I can't remember what the number was, but it was at least 50. Was that?
Yeah, it's over 50.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that is it's a tribute to you for what you started, but it's also a tribute to how you are as a person and humility by saying it doesn't have to be exactly the way it was in my first book. In fact, you guys have made it better. And
Yes.
then because I worry about that with some things that come into schools. It's like you have to do this and you have to do it exactly this way. And
Oh,
that's not how it is. That's not how classrooms are.
no. In fact, I like to use the phrase, you do you, because no one knows your students like you do, or your curriculum like you do, or your administration, or your community. And so to me, one of the something that I find so flattering is if someone can take something that I started and now use it to help best their students in their classroom.
Absolutely. No. Well, and I think that is what, I think both books, well, you have the two books about the powerful teaching, powerful classrooms, where you talk about retrieval practice and all the different strategies that they can use. But then you had the companion book for parents.
Yes, that is, excuse me. I also have a parent's guide to powerful teaching. And my stipulations for that book was it had to be less than 100 pages and it had to be less than $10 because I really wanted it totally accessible. And it is twofold purpose. One, that parents can get this and really help their kids at home. Here's strategies you can use at home that are really going to help. And secondly, teachers, we know how busy we are. And it was a way to have a dialogue between a teacher and a parent. So if teachers are using this, the science of learning, they could easily recommend, here's a book. And so when I'm talking about retrieval or spacing, here, Patrice is going to explain it to you right there.
Yeah.
So I think that has its own little niche. And that one was published by John Catt. The others are Wiley.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's important, again, just as experienced teachers want to help and share, many parents want to help and with their kids, but just don't know how. And they may have spent, hours with their kids, doing ineffective strategies.
That is so absolutely on target because we've all been to school. So often we think, well, we made it through, and so this worked for me. Surely it's going to work. But too often, those are the ineffective strategies. And it is so easy to just do a couple quick little things that turn it around to make it effective. And, when parents see their kids study, at the kitchen table for an hour and a half for an exam and not do well, that is, it's heartbreaking for the student and the parent. I saw my child studying, but they were not studying effectively. And so being able to have this conversation where students can study more effectively, which means they don't have to spend as much time and they get better grades. And parents aren't having to see their children struggle so hard. It's such a win.
No. And then when the parents are working with the children whose teacher is doing the same techniques, it's just you get a virtuous cycle there. Then the kids even bought into what the parents are doing. So
Yeah, in fact, in the parents guide, I call it the teaching triangle, that this all important collaboration when the teacher and the parent and the student are all on the same page, it's like, of course, the student is going to be very successful.
yeah. Well, Patrice, it's always a joy talking to you. Do you have any questions for me?
I do. So I am wondering, what is ahead in your future? Do you have any other books coming down the road?
Well, I'm working on a couple projects with a couple people, and one has to do with it's part of a group called Schools Next, and the impetus for the group was to attempt to rethink what a school day looks like for children who are post-pandemic, who are post-smartphones, who are addicted to screens, and how to reclaim them, I guess, and how school can reclaim them. Because so that's one project we're working on a book about that right now, and we are hoping to be able to work with schools. We have started. We our our thought is to work from the boardroom to parents. And so we're starting with parents. We do have some school districts who have contracted with us to work with parents and with some ideas of how to detox the kids. But the reality is the parents are in the same situation. So, it's like you needed the parent book. We need the parents as well to say, this is what's happening to your kid. This is how you're impacting it. And these are some things that we can do to mitigate that. We
Yeah,
are
it's
not,
the same
yeah,
thing, that teaching triangle, you
yes.
know? When we work together, whether it's on technology or learning or whatever, it's like we all want what's best for our kids, right? And rather than having any being adversaries at all, it's like working together is so powerful.
Yeah, and it's the only way. I mean, the schools
Hmm.
have the kids. It doesn't, you can work all day at schools, but it doesn't take much to undo all the work.
Hmm.
So absolutely right. The Tell me that term again. What did you call it? The teaching triad, the
The teaching triangle.
teaching triangle. I knew it was alliterative, and I just wanted to get it. All right, Patrice, always a joy talking to you, and I hope we run into each other soon.
Oh, I hope so. Jean, always great talking to
All right.
you, and good luck with your new books and your new projects. It's good stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye bye, Patrice.
Bye.
If you're enjoying these podcasts, tell a friend. Also, please leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. You can follow me on Blue Sky at G Tavernetti, on Twitter, X, at G Tavernetti, and you can learn more about me and the work I do at my website, tesscg.com. That's TESSCG.com, where you will also find information about ordering my books, Teach Fast, Focused Adaptable Structured Teaching, and maximizing the impact of coaching cycles. Talk to you soon.